Hello everybody, and thank you for watching my presentation for the International Comic Arts Forum in 2020-2021. My name is Ben Machlin, and I am a PhD student at Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts. And my presentation is entitled Celebrating the Ordinary in Chris Ware's Rusty Brown. Comic Studies is not unfamiliar with the works of Chris Ware. For the last 20 years, he's been publishing some of the most commercially successful work, as well as some of the most academically acclaimed. Ware's 2019 publication of Rusty Brown is no exception. Rusty Brown tells the interweaving stories of several characters who all attend or teach at an Omaha school. The text is intensely fixated on the life experiences that are buried in words. As such, I look to ordinary language philosophy, which holds that philosophical problems are simply linguistic ones, and that solutions are offered in communication without using abstract language. In a comic, that would equate to briefly disregarding the form through which stories are conveyed, and instead focusing on the uses of language within the text. In this analysis, I therefore apply an ordinary language reading, which emphasizes the uses of language in the text, rather than the formal presentation of images. In this panel from Rusty Brown, Chris Ware implants himself as a character with a slightly altered name, as an art teacher, telling his students to model their drawings after him. And he reminds them to capture the gesture, not the form. This is what we would be attempting to do in an ordinary language reading of a comic. Rather than addressing the form, as in the arrangement of panels, the physical presentation of the story, we're merely looking at the content of the narrative. In 2017, Toril Moy published an examination of ordinary language philosophy entitled Revolution of the Ordinary, which examines the approaches to language taken by ordinary language philosophers such as Ludwig Wittgenstein and Stanley Cavell. Wittgenstein states that to imagine a language means to imagine a form of life. And Toril Moy explains that this can be interpreted as a shared lifestyle which forms its own vocabulary. Moy offers the example of a Spanish dialect around the culture of bullfighting, which is largely incomprehensible even to some native Spanish speakers. She states that to learn the language of bullfighting is to learn to see the bullfight, just as learning the language of sewing is to learn to see stitches and seams. Some words rely on concepts that must be experienced in order to be understood, and in this way, Moy explains, words and practices are intertwined. In one of the earlier pages of the book, Mr. Brown, a teacher at an Omaha school, writes a passage on the chalkboard for his students to copy. He writes, "The smell of this school, overwhelming to anyone entering from the nostril-bracing clarity of the Nebraska winter, might be dissected, through great effort, into some of its contributing parts, like spilled teacher's lounge coffee, old milk, formaldehyde, lip gloss, and hot lunch. But pinpointing the precise origin of any one of these components would eventually prove only about as useful as the successful extraction of the internal organs of a live frog, pinned into paraffin, gasping for its life." This chilling passage attempts to translate sensory experience into text, but ultimately it argues that such an effort would invariably fail. Mr. Brown describes a smell, but odor operates as a metonym for all the many different stories and lives within the school from which it is produced. Rusty Brown offers several examples of the reliance of language on experience. In one such situation, Mrs. Cole, a third-grade teacher, writes the word hospitality on the chalkboard and asks her students to demonstrate the practice that it describes when a new student arrives at the school. The fact that the students don't recognize the word indicates that they've never needed to describe that experience. Children of this age tend to be cared for. They don't tend to care for others. When Chalky White becomes a new student at the school, Mrs. Cole believes it's time to teach the students how to care for others. But until they're faced with the challenge of learning to be hospitable, they have no grasp of what the word written on the board means. Rusty Brown is repeatedly interested in the experiences through which language is acquired. In one section, readers follow the entire life of a character named Jordan Lint, with one page dedicated to each of his 78 years. Jordan witnesses domestic abuse as a child, and as an adult, suffers similar dysfunction in his family, including marital infidelity, and even a lawsuit against his own son. Jordan knows no other way to parent other than what he's experienced. Toril Moy explains that to learn what to call something, whether the word be father or love, is to learn what it is. For Jordan, parenting necessarily involves violence. The two are inseparable. as are the experiences that inform his understanding of what the word means. In another moment in Rusty Brown, Chalky overhears his sister Alice asking about the origin of the name Omaha, their new home. Their grandmother explains that the land was named by the Potawatomi tribe that originally inhabited the land. Chalky struggles to pronounce the name, and neither Alice nor their grandmother attempt to help him with the pronunciation. The grandmother knows of the tribe, but she's not sharing the experience with Chalky, so he fails to retain knowledge of the name. The exposure to this lifestyle is not being handed down through generations, and the word ultimately evaporates from Chalky's language. It's not enough to name a concept. One must share an experience to properly educate. Although an oral description helps to preserve the tribe's cultural history, much of the experiential principles of the culture are lost in translation. An interaction with the tribe or any immersive example might help preserve Chalky's memory of who they were. Without experience, however, the word isn't preserved, and neither is the concept in the learner's mind. Because Chalky cannot imagine the Potawatomi people, there's no visual presentation of what they look like in the text. I've provided them here because, as ordinary language philosophy reminds us, text cannot convey this experience. W.K. Brown, father of the title character Rusty Brown, was a successful sci-fi author who wrote a short story after a romantic encounter with his first love. In this story, he repeatedly refers to his companion's brunette hair. When he later meets his future wife, who has red hair, he publishes the story with the help of her father, but he replaces every mention of brown hair with a red or rusty equivalent. Therefore, in addition to referring to Mr. Brown's son, the title Rusty Brown also refers to the writer's revision of crossing out the use of the adjective brown and replacing it with the word rusty to hide the work's original inspiration. But the original cannot be fully hidden by this pen mark. And this one word indicates a vastly more significant experience, which continues to live on both in the manuscript and in the mind of W.K. Brown. In this image, Brown reminds us that he repeatedly thinks back on that relationship. The works of Chris Ware continue to explore new arrangements of image and text, revealing fascinating new uses for each of these elements. Comics provide amazing opportunities to share the experiences that are the foundations of language, but as ordinary language philosophy reminds us, these experiences are essential in order for us to grasp the meanings of words. Rusty Brown is continually fixated on the importance of experience and its connection with words. When we read comics, it's very easy to fixate on how narratives are conveyed visually. Because narratives convey lives, they must also convey the words and experiences that are tied to each other, of which that life consists. Although there's never enough to say about the innovations being done in the forms of comics, ordinary language philosophy gives us a new way of embracing the lives that are portrayed in comics. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you'll join us at the roundtable discussion which will take place in March, hosted by the International Comic Arts Forum. Thank you to the organization for allowing me to participate, and thank you for watching.